Hey, welcome back, everybody. Of course, this is Dr. Keith McNally, and this is the Question Guy podcast. We're in season three, and I'm here with Willy Wood, and he was on the call before. And so we talked about scaling your coaching business because he's a coach of coaches. He is an expert of experts. And so we're going to go a deeper dive into how to look for the problem areas that coaches face in order to overcome them and really be successful in their entrepreneurial efforts. I know that's a lot for me to say. And let's see if Willie's got the secrets. What do you got for us today, man?
Well, I don't know if I got the secrets, but I've got some experiences along those lines, and I want to broaden out your the audience just a little bit to not just coaches, but consultants, authors, speakers. It's kind of what I call the expert business model. So
Okay.
anybody who's basically in the business of putting their expertise out there in the world and selling it and so on kind of fits into that same entrepreneur model. And so they tend to go through some of the same um, phases of business growth. And then we talked about possibly going into some of the common problems that they run into, mistakes that they make along the way.
Well, just to kind of give us some backdrop, in our first conversation, we really talked about the flip of the coin in a sense. And I used to use that term a lot, meaning that people who think they're experts in something hang up a shingle and say, I'm selling XYZ. All you need to do is come to me and I'm going to solve your problems. And we agreed that that's not the best way to go about getting your clientele, at least not as your high dollar clients and a sustainable client, process because your the real goal is to narrow in and hone in on a specific problem, a specific niche, a specific market, and really say that I'm going to solve your problem rather than saying this is my expertise that can solve your problem. So you listed a lot. So authors, coaches, consultants, is there a commonality in, you talked about the entrepreneurial model. What's the commonality with that within that model that says what what I just said? I'm the expert and I have
Yeah.
something to give you, but that's not
So
really
the
the best way to go about it.
so I guess one commonality for all of those groups of people is that they get too focused on their expertise. In other words, they're looking inward to here's what I have to sell, here's what I have to offer, which is great, and we need the experts, but we need to make sure that they're talking to the right people, for their expertise. And so the first big mistake that I see people make when they make that first leap into an expert business model is they decide that they know what the people want
Right.
from them instead of actually asking the people. So and everybody who goes into an expert business has a general sense of who their people are because for example, I work with educational consultants mostly. So those are people who generally start out as teachers and they either are just kind of naturally talented in some particular area in their field or they develop that expertise through study or personal experience or whatever. But generally what happens is in their own uh, area, their own region, their own school district, they become known as the guy or the girl to go to when you need something about X, and
Mhm.
X is their area of expertise. They get so good at it that they start to get inquiries from outside of their region, and they decide at some point, you know what, I'm going to go into business doing this. There's enough people who want this. So in all of those discussions and all those events, up until that point, they've been talking to people, and people are asking them for certain things. So when they decide to start a business, they think, okay, I know what they want because I've been talking to these people. But when you actually launch the business, what I coach people to do is then go immediately before you put your website up, before you start doing your marketing language, get a bunch of people on some Zoom calls, run a transcript of what they actually tell you are their problems and what they're looking for solutions. Because no matter everybody I've ever coached, they're always surprised to some extent when they do that, because it's always a little different than what they thought it was going to be. People have some problems that they haven't heard about before, or there's a different slant on the problem than they were thinking. People use different language to describe the problem than they would have used. And when you do that kind of inquiry, if you actually talk to enough people in your target market, then you get a real solid sense of what they really need, and what then you can decide how to word your marketing language, and what products and services to offer that will fit exactly the problems that they need solved. Then you're on solid footing. But 99% of people who go into business don't do that step. They assume that they know what their market wants, and so that's what they put up on their website, and then they're always frustrated that they're not getting as many inquiries as they thought they would. So that's
Well,
the
that
first mistake.
that raises, some significant questions. And, me branding myself as the question guy, I could always ask a question or two. How much time? So my question to you is, how much time does that take, to do that type of, I guess, what research, or,
Yeah, I just
background
call
work?
them research calls. Yeah.
Okay.
It takes a little while. In my experience, it doesn't take too long to do a Zoom call. You can have a research question that is, like, for example, when I did this in my own business, my research question was, what are the three biggest problems slash scenarios slash questions you run into in growing your educational consulting business? Because that's my audience. And so I just asking them for three things, and you can get good in-depth answers to three things like that in a 30-minute Zoom call. So the actual calls themselves don't take that long. And I always tell people to try to do 20 to 25 of those calls before you feel like, before you start drawing conclusions, because you need enough data to start seeing the trends and the things that keep getting repeated.
Mhm.
And so to do 20 or 25 of those, what causes the delay is just getting people to agree to do the calls.
Do the call, yeah.
And as I'm sure you know, as you're always getting people to do calls. So you have to reach out to a bunch of people. You have to keep following up until you get yeses, until you get them scheduled. And generally about 3 months or so is what it takes to get all those calls done. But it's foundational for everything in their business from that point forward. It might be something that you would do um, again a few years down the road, but you wouldn't have to do it again for a while, because unless the market changes in some drastic way. So yeah, it takes a little while.
Well, then that's one hiccup. What are some other hiccups or problems that entrepreneurs who are in the expert space are facing?
Mhm. Yeah, so I would say the second one is, we talked about different stages of business growth the first time
Mhm.
you had me on. And that first stage is really just getting yourself set up and talking to the people, finding out what they want, and then putting yourself out there as, I'm the person who can answer those problems.
Right.
The second stage is, once you start getting some inquiries coming in, is to scale up the marketing so that you're reaching out to more people, and more people will come and see what you have to offer. The second mistake that I see very often is that they start to scale up the marketing before they do the first thing that we just talked about. In other words, if you have the marketing materials wrong, if you're off on what you're putting out there, then there might not be that many people that want what you're trying to sell. So it doesn't make much difference if you drive a whole bunch of traffic to a website if it's not going to convert because people aren't interested in what you're selling. So this mistake is tied intricately to that first mistake. If what you put out on your website and in your marketing materials and social media, wherever you do your marketing, if what you're putting out there is not something that matches and solves the problems that your target market have, it doesn't matter how many eyeballs are on it. They're just going to all say no.
Because they're
So
not the right eyeballs. And so
yeah.
this actually leads to a different type of question because I have conversations with different types of coaches, and there seems to be a general theme, and I kind of want your intake or your input on this is when they do the research and they get an idea of the pain points that people need to be addressed, they're also looking at the profile of the people who are making those pain points known. And so they actually paint for themselves literally, in some cases, literally they paint, they at least have an idea of what the primary target market looks like: male, female, age, uh, ethnicity, what all those components,
And actually,
hobbies. Go ahead.
yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because actually I kind of just skipped over that. And that in my when I'm coaching people, that goes together with the reaching out. You got to do that first before you
Okay.
reach out. You got to know who you're reaching out to. You just can't randomly, reach out to all of your LinkedIn connections or whatever.
But is
Yeah,
it
you're
that
right. So
precise? Like
yes,
ethnicity, hobbies, car they drive, where they
that
live?
that is a discussion
Okay.
in the marketing field. So, and I've seen both extremes, and I kind of fall somewhere in the middle. But the first time I did what's called creating a ideal customer avatar is usually what it's called. It's called different things, but the first time I did that for my business, I was following the advice of somebody who was more on the go into a lot of detail end of things. So my first customer avatar was I did that. I thought about what age range. First of all, most of my customers are female, so it's a she. I thought about the age range of most of my people, my clients, and so I put that age range in there. And then I looked up, so I picked an age right smack in the middle of that range, which in my case was 39 years old. I went back into Google and said, okay, what were the most common names given to female babies 39 years ago? And so I picked a name that was at the top of the list, and and just that kind of detail. Where does she shop? Is she married? How many kids does she have? How old are they? How does that impact her life? Um, Political leanings, everything. And so
Hmm.
I did that kind of avatar, and then I also turned those demographics and psychographics into a written narrative description of my client customer avatar, which typed out single space was 9 pages long.
Nine
So
pages.
so it would be fair to say that I have a pretty clear idea of who that avatar is. Um, but then I've done some other avatars for other segments of my business. And after that, and when I was looking at some of the advice of people who tend to believe that certain facts in that big avatar are not as important as others. And what you really need is just, here's a few things that you really need to know about your audience. And so it was more of a scaled down model that I used for the next few avatars I did. So I guess I would say that, use whatever model you want until you get to the point where you just feel like um, you have a really clear picture of who you're talking to, and that's got to be based on your experience with using your expertise in the past. Who really talks to you about that? Who wants it? Who needs it? Um, but where that comes in really helpful is then whenever and I mostly write. So whenever I write a blog post, for example, to one of my customer avatars, I look at that avatar before. And another thing that I've seen to do and I have done is to go out and Google images and find an image that you think reflects this person that you've created on paper. And I literally look at that picture and read the avatar before I write something. So, I mean, any pop culture references I might make in a blog post, they have to be things that that person would smile at or get the joke or whatever. So yeah, that's first. And then when you take that avatar, those several avatars, and that's who you try to reach out to for your calls, your research calls, is try to find as many people like that or similar to that in the ballpark to talk to. Then you do your research calls, you find out what they really want and need, and then you design your products and services to fit those needs. So I'm glad you pulled me back to that because, yeah,
Well,
that's an important step.
I did because again, that's been a consistent theme when I talk to people in the who coach, and it's also a consistent theme. Well, it's a necessary theme when I'm starting to get into event event driven stuff like summits. And I just had a local conference, a leadership conference here in Hampton Roads, Virginia in January. I'm doing an educational summit, international summit later on this year. This is 2023. And so in order to drive sponsors to these events, you have to be really, really clear as to who that avatar is, because sponsorship is about marketing and they're going to market to a specific people, not
Mhm.
unless it's a really big, big thing, which these can't be. But anyway, so that's right on, that kind of conversation is to know who you really need to talk to in order to get the optimal response back and the numbers back.
Yeah. Yeah. So Avatar, down the problems and solutions, market that. Don't get ahead of yourself and do a whole bunch of lead generation until you get those first things nailed down.
Mm.
Then you'll know who you're looking for in your lead generation, who you're trying to attract. So then it can start paying off for you. So those are some of the biggies. There's another one that comes up often in the expert business model. So this is one more I'll leave with you as far as a common problem, and that is when somebody um, does a big product launch before it's time.
Mm.
So
That's an interesting idea. Yeah.
doing an online course or whatever. So many people who are experts, I mean, they have expertise to share.
Mhm.
So obviously they want to write a book about it. They want to do an online course about it. They want to create something to get a vehicle to get that out there. The problem is if you do it too soon, it's just going to fall flat. And I see that happen all the time, where they didn't do these first few steps that we've been talking about. They don't get the foundation in place, and then they don't have an audience for the thing that they're launching. They haven't built the audience first.
Right.
So I see a lot of people, again, the people I work with, educational consultants, the first thing a lot of them want to do is write a book. And I was just talking to a lady the other day, and she said, well, I've got four. Well, hopefully you didn't make this mistake.
Oh, totally, man. I totally wrote the book. I love my
yeah,
book.
but did you build an audience for it before you wrote the book and
No,
launched it?
I like writing.
Question.
A good book.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
actually it's a start of a 6 book series, but okay.
Well, that's great. Then you've got plenty of time. um, so it's not about not writing the book. I want people to write the books. I want the book launches to be successful. And so in order to do that, it makes sense to build an audience for the book before you put the book out there. And so I see, like I said, there's a lady I talked to the other day, and she told me, well, can you help me sell these books? And I said, well, what books are you talking about? And she said, I have 480 books in my garage
Oh my gosh.
that, I wrote this book. I got all these copies printed, and, my relatives bought a few. She didn't have anybody to market them to. She didn't have a marketing message designed. She hadn't built up a mailing list on her website. She had, so, you know, timing is very important. Do things in the right order and things work a lot better. And, and another little thing that people sometimes do, that people could do and kind of do both things at once. I always tell people to, if you're a blogger, blog the book. It's so, think about, so, you're going to put out a blog once a month, twice a month, once a week, whatever your schedule is. You're going to put out a blog post. Why not have a series of blog posts that add up to a book eventually? So in other words, it's just about being intentional about it from the front. So if you have an idea for a book, chunk it out into the chapters, chunk the chapters down into the constituent parts of each chapter, write a blog post about each of those mini chunks,
Wow.
and make it a series. Now, that's going to take you a while. But so would just writing the
Writing a
book
book.
as a book.
Right.
But what the advantage of writing it as blog posts before, instead of writing it as a book, is those blog posts are drawing an audience all
Right.
along the way, and getting people to sign up for your mailing list. And guess what? Your best customers for your book when it comes out are the people already on your mailing list who've been reading your blog post. And there's all these strategies for book launches that are important to do as well, to make sure that when that book does go out there, that it gets a bunch of reviews and high ranking reviews and shoots up the Google rankings and all of that. There's strategies to that. But the biggest mistake people might like, you can do all the book launch stuff. If you don't do the building the audience first, even the book launch strategies are going to kind of fall flat. So, build the audience before you write the book.
Well,
Yeah.
those are tremendous things, tips, expert advice to consider before we close out this conversation. Give our audience an action item. What can they do today, right now, to kind of change their, and I'll use the word, I don't like using it too often, change their mindset in terms of how they're going about collecting the data they need in order to secure their clients or an audience, as we're putting it.
Yeah, I just think that everything, kind of going back to the beginning of our discussion, everything comes down to knowing your audience.
Okay.
So, I mean, it doesn't matter how fancy you want to get. If your plans eventually are to write a whole bunch of books, bunch of online courses, have a mastermind group, all of these things, you've got all these big plans. It all comes down to, is there anybody who wants that stuff?
Mhm.
So it's all comes down to knowing your audience and what are the challenges they face, what keeps them up at night, and what do I have to offer that will solve those problems. And at any stage of your business growth, if you lose sight of that, things are going to stop working. So, you may have several successes and kind of build it up to a certain point, and then you get away from checking in with that audience, and all of a sudden things stop working. So you've got to constantly do it. That's what I would say.
Willie Wood, this has been a great conversation to have. And I appreciate you joining me once again on the Question Guy podcast. And do you have a book?
Um, I wrote a book that I'm not going to promote here because it's been 10 years on that book, and it was more
Okay,
for teachers. I'm kind of in a different business now, but I will have a few more coming out soon. Yeah.
cool. Well, this has been another edition of the Question Guy podcast. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Take care.